Luke walked across the sand of Tatooine with his usual curiosity, trying to escape the monotonous routine of farm life. The twin suns burned brightly, but the young man didn't care, as his mind sought adventures that seemed to be missing from his life. That's when something caught his attention. A strange light emanating from inside a cave that he rarely noticed. It was as if it had appeared at that moment, like a silent invitation. Driven by the curiosity that always guided him, Luke decided to approach it to investigate. Upon entering the cave, he felt the air change, cooler and denser, as if the space were separated from the desert outside. The light at the back pulsed, vibrant, forming circles that spun in strange patterns. Luke narrowed his eyes, trying to understand what he was seeing, until suddenly the glow intensified, creating a portal that seemed to expand and stabilize before him. A whirlwind of energy opened, and on the other side, he saw the silhouette of a young man, standing tall, dressed in Jedi robes. Luke took a step forward, frightened, but at the same time unable to move away. The man seemed equally surprised, watching him intently. There was no physical barrier between them, but Luke realized he couldn't cross it, as if an invisible wall separated the two worlds. Still, it was as if they shared the same space. He took a deep breath and broke the silence with the first question that came to mind. Are you a Jedi?" Luke asked, his voice laden with uncertainty and fascination. It was the first time he had used that word with real expectation. Until then, he had only heard vague stories of old legends. But in front of this man, something seemed different. The other man raised his eyebrows, measuring his words, as if trying to understand exactly what was happening. "I am," replied the young man after a brief moment. "But tell me, boy, how did you get here? This place shouldn't be accessible to just anyone." His voice conveyed firmness, but also genuine curiosity. He seemed more intrigued than willing to intimidate. Luke, still amazed, tried to formulate a coherent answer, but the only thing he was sure of was that he had never seen anything like it before. "I don't know," said Luke. "I saw a light. I thought it was something strange. I came here and found this. I've never seen anything like it." His eyes remained fixed on the man, analyzing every detail. His warrior's stature, the saber hanging from his waist, his determined gaze. Something about him seemed familiar, but Luke couldn't explain why. On the other side, the Jedi watched the boy closely. There was a strong presence around him, something the Force whispered incessantly. "You seem different," said the man. "It's as if the Force has guided you here." Luke didn't quite understand, but the mention of that word, Force, rekindled memories of the few stories he had heard in secret. "My uncle doesn't like me asking questions about these things," Luke confessed, looking away for a moment. "But I've always felt that there was something beyond all this, something I should know about. And now, seeing you, I don't think I'm crazy." The Jedi took a deep breath, looking down, as if fighting against internal memories. "You're not crazy," the man replied. "There are many things that are not told to ordinary people. The Force is in everyone, but only a few learn to touch it. Tell me, kid, do you really believe in the Jedi?" The question sounded direct, almost like a test. Luke hesitated for a moment, but his eyes flashed with conviction. "Yes, I believe. I always have. My father, he was a great Jedi." The man on the other side of the crack looked up, surprised, as if those words echoed within him more than they should. A heavy silence filled the space between them. The Jedi leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the boy, as if trying to anticipate his next sentence. "What was his name?" he asked, his voice lower, almost hesitant. Luke swallowed hard. There was no way to predict the impact that answer would have. Staring at the strange man on the other side of the portal, he replied firmly, "Anakin Skywalker." On the other side, the man froze. The name struck his heart like thunder, reverberating between memories and destinies that had not yet been fulfilled. The portal glowed intensely, as if the Force itself had trembled at the revelation. The name echoed in the air like thunder inside Anakin's mind. He stared at the boy standing before him, separated by that barrier of light that seemed to pulsate with living energy. It was at that moment that the truth hit him. This was no ordinary encounter, nor was it an illusion. It was a rift opened by the Force itself, connecting two points in time in a way that was impossible to explain. Anakin's heart raced, but he kept his composure. He couldn't let the turmoil he felt show. Not only did this boy have the same last name as him, but he had also claimed that his father was a great Jedi. The pieces fit together in a disturbing way, but he decided not to reveal anything yet. The risk of compromising the temporal balance was too great. He needed to understand what was before him before exposing himself. With his mind racing, he asked calmly, "Luke, what era do you live in? What is the galaxy around you like?" The boy seemed surprised by the question, but answered without hesitation. "Everything is controlled by the Empire. It's been that way for as long as I can remember. People live in fear, always obeying orders without question." Anakin clenched his fist discreetly. The future he heard was not one of freedom, but of oppression. "Empire?" repeated the Jedi, his gaze fixed on the boy. Luke confirmed. "Yes, the Galactic Empire. Every system is under its rule. There is no escape." The weight of that revelation tightened Anakin's chest. The Republic, which he had sworn to protect, would become an authoritarian regime. He did not respond immediately, as he struggled to control the indignation growing in his heart. "And who rules this empire?" he insisted, his voice firm but laden with suspicion. Luke lowered his gaze, as if uttering the name were dangerous. "The Emperor, Palpatine. He rules over everything and everyone. The Senate, the armies, the fleets. Nothing escapes his control." Shock coursed through every fiber of Anakin's being. Palpatine, the man he respected and listened to as an advisor, would become the supreme tyrant. Anakin took a deep breath, trying to maintain his self-control. The Force had shown him something he would never have believed by other means. He needed to change the course of his questions. "What about the Jedi? What happened to them in your time?" Luke looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and indignation. "Everyone says they were exterminated, that they were traitors. But I never believed that. I always thought they were heroes. My father was one of them, and he died fighting, as far as I know." Those words struck Anakin like blades. The future showed not only the fall of the Order, but also the destruction of his own legacy. He couldn't confirm anything to the boy, but every detail reinforced the weight of what was destined to happen. "So there are no more Jedi?" he asked cautiously. Luke shook his head. "Not that I know of. Only stories. Only shadows." The silence lasted a few seconds until Anakin resumed. "And does the Emperor rule alone? Or does he have someone at his side, someone who enforces his will?" Luke took a deep breath and replied hesitantly, "Yes, Darth Vader. Everyone fears him. He is like the Emperor's right hand, his hunter and executioner. Where he goes, nothing is left." Anakin felt the heavy air around the crack. The name sounded like an omen. Darth Vader. A Sith title for sure. Something in him trembled at that, as if the Force were screaming that this name was linked to his own destiny. He didn't let the boy notice his discomfort, maintaining his investigative tone. "This Vader, who is he? Have you seen him with your own eyes?" Luke shook his head. "No, I've only heard stories. They say he wears black armor, that his breathing is like a monster suffocating the air. Some say he's not entirely human. Others swear he's invincible. But everyone agrees. No one survives when he decides to hunt." The young man trembled a little as he spoke, and Anakin realized the real weight that name already carried in the future. "So fear rules the galaxy?" Anakin murmured, more to himself than to the boy. Luke looked up, trying to decipher the expression on the strange Jedi's face. "It's fear. That's all we know. But sometimes I think things can change, that there is still hope." The portal glowed more intensely, as if the Force itself was reacting to the contrast between darkness and hope. Anakin fixed his eyes on the boy. Inside, he felt increasingly certain that this encounter was not accidental. The future and the past were intertwined before him, and that crack was living proof that the Force had greater plans. "The Force does not bring us together by chance, Luke," he said, revealing nothing more. "Perhaps we are meant to learn something from each other, something that could change everything." Anakin couldn't shake the thoughts that burned inside him. Ever since Luke had mentioned the name Skywalker, the visions that tormented him night after night had returned with renewed force. Always the same scene. Padme dying, her life slipping away without him being able to stop it. The fear that consumed him seemed to take shape before that crack. Unable to hold back any longer, he let slip the question he feared most. "Luke, what about your mother? What happened to her?" His voice came out shaky, laden with anguish. The boy seemed surprised by the tone of the question, but did not hesitate to answer. "She died in childbirth. I never knew her." The words sounded simple, but to Anakin they were like daggers. The air seemed to disappear from the cave. It was direct confirmation of his worst nightmares. No, it can't be," Anakin exclaimed, his voice failing. "I saw her every night, dying, and now you tell me it really happened." His gaze was lost in the void, and his hands trembled as the portal pulsed, reacting to the whirlwind of emotions. Luke took a step back, startled by the intensity of that reaction, not understanding the magnitude of what he had just said. The young man tried to intervene. "Hey, I only know what I was told. I don't remember her. I never heard much. All I know is that she died when I was born. I didn't mean to upset you like this." But Anakin was overcome with despair, unable to hear. Tears threatened to spill, and his breathing quickened to an almost uncontrolled pace. "If that's true, then I failed her," he cried, his voice breaking. "She is my life, my reason, and I couldn't save her. The Force deceived me, showed me visions, and I was unable to prevent it." Luke instinctively reached out toward the portal, even though he knew he couldn't cross it. "You need to calm down. I don't know who you're talking about, but you can't blame yourself like this." The Jedi raised his face, his eyes burning with pain. "You don't understand, kid. She was everything to me. Without her, there is no path, no choice. If she died giving birth, then nothing I've done will have meant anything." Luke swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. He had no answers, but the feeling that he needed to help this man grew inside him. "Look, I don't know what you've been through, or what you've seen in your dreams," Luke said firmly. "But I know what it's like to feel alone. Still, I carry on. She gave me life, and even though I never knew her, I can't waste that. Maybe you need to think that way too." Anakin stared at the boy in silence, shaken by his unexpectedly mature tone. Luke's words echoed like a reminder of what Padme always said about hope. The Jedi lowered his head, trying to control his tears. "You speak like someone who knew pain too early. That's not fair." Luke pressed his lips together, not knowing how to respond. He just held his gaze, as if he wanted to convey strength through silence. The portal vibrated again, as if the Force was reacting to the weight of emotions. Anakin took a deep breath, trying to regain control. Luke, though confused, remained close, attentive. It felt as if, somehow, this conversation was serving to hold the Jedi back from the edge of emotional collapse. "You're not alone," Luke said finally. "I know you're not." Anakin blinked several times, fighting back tears. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I still have something to learn from this. But the pain doesn't go away." Luke sighed and replied, "The pain never really goes away, but you decide whether you're going to live trapped in it or honor those who are gone. I chose to believe that my mother gave me life out of love, and that keeps me going." For a few moments, silence filled the room. The glow from the portal illuminated their faces, united by pain, but also by a thread of understanding. It was a fragile moment, but a true one. Anakin breathed more calmly, while Luke struggled to bear the weight of words he himself did not fully understand. Then, discreet footsteps echoed outside the cave. Luke turned, surprised. A figure in a worn cloak appeared at the entrance, watching the scene with attentive eyes. The silhouette was unmistakable to him. The boy's eyes widened and he whispered softly, "Ben Kenobi." Anakin was still trying to catch his breath after his conversation with Luke when he heard footsteps echoing from the other side of the crevice. He turned and saw a man in a worn cloak approaching the cave entrance, his face half hidden by his hood. Luke looked surprised and called out to him, "Ben!" Anakin's heart raced, because the Force began to show him that this was no stranger. The man raised his head, revealing an aged face, but his eyes held a steadiness that Anakin recognized from somewhere. The silence became heavy, as if the crevice itself held its breath awaiting this encounter. The man then spoke, his voice calm but laden with emotion. "Anakin?" The young Jedi shuddered inside, feeling that names sound different when it came out of the old man's mouth. It was as if there was history in those syllables, as if he were someone who really knew him. He narrowed his eyes and asked cautiously, "Who are you? How do you know my name?" On the other side, Luke looked from one to the other, confused, lost between the two figures connected by the Force. The man took a deep breath, lifted his hood a little higher, and declared, "I am Obi-Wan Kenobi." The statement hit Anakin like a blade. He couldn't fit his master into that aged face. "Obi-Wan?" he repeated in shock. "No, it can't be." The crevice vibrated as if the Force itself confirmed that revelation, and for a moment Anakin almost believed he was in a dream. Luke interrupted, even more confused. "Are you a Jedi too?" The question echoed in the cave, and the old man replied calmly, "Yes, Luke, I am a Jedi. I fought in the Clone Wars, side by side with many heroes. Difficult times, but times of courage." Luke's eyes widened. "You fought in the Clone Wars?" The boy looked amazed, not realizing that his new friend was standing before his own master from another time. Anakin, however, remained fixed on Obi-Wan, trying to believe it. "If it's really you, prove it to me," he demanded. The old man nodded slightly, unperturbed. "You were my Padawan. You learned to fight under my guidance, but you always followed your heart more than the rules. I knew you like few others, and I know the weight you carry inside, even if you won't admit it." The words echoed like ancient truths that only someone close could say. Anakin's heart stirred. The instinct to deny was strong, but each sentence seemed to open memories that were stored inside him. "You're so different," he said, his voice trembling. Obi-Wan replied without hesitation. "The sons of Tatooine weren't very good to me. Time changes everyone, Anakin, but the essence of the Force remains. And the Force wanted me to be here now before you." The sincerity in the old man's gaze began to break through the barrier of mistrust. Meanwhile, Luke watched intently, amazed and confused at the same time. "Ben, are you really a Jedi? You've always lived here on Tatooine and never said anything. Why hide it from me?" Obi-Wan looked away from the boy for a moment, keeping his focus on Anakin. "There are things that should not be revealed before their time, Luke. But now the Force has decided to unite the past and the future, and we cannot ignore this call." His firm tone made it clear that he was speaking to both of them, but especially to his former apprentice. Anakin took a step forward into the rift, feeling he needed to understand the reason for this encounter. "If it's you, Obi-Wan, why did you come? What do you want from me?" The old man kept his gaze serene. "I did not come by choice. The Force opened this rift so that we could meet. Perhaps so you can see that there are still paths, that darkness does not have to be your destiny." The words were like direct blows to Anakin's soul, as he struggled with the anger and pain inside him. The crevice pulsed intensely, reflecting Anakin's inner conflict. "You speak as if you know me better than I know myself," he said, almost in a whisper. Obi-Wan replied, "Because I have known you. I have known your strength, your loyalty, and also your fears. And I say to you, Anakin, do not let those fears define who you will be." The young Jedi closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing those words that seemed to come from a distant future. Silence hung between them until Luke, unable to contain his curiosity, asked again, "Did you really fight in the Clone Wars together?" Obi-Wan looked at the boy but answered indirectly. "The Clone Wars were fought by many, Heroes rose and tragedies were born from them. But what matters is not the war, Luke, but what we choose to be after it. Anakin realized that the old man was avoiding giving too many details, as if he wanted to protect the boy from painful truths. Little by little, Anakin began to accept that this was indeed Obi-Wan. Time may have changed his face, but his posture, calmness, and way of speaking were unmistakable. A mixture of longing and anger burned inside him, but above all else there was a thread of trust, the memory of a bond that had never been completely broken. If it is you, Obi-Wan, then tell me, why am I here? What should I do? The old master took a deep breath and replied gravely, "Learn from this, Anakin. The future is not yet written in stone. The Force has shown you something terrible, but it has also given you a chance. What you do with this knowledge is up to you." Before he could answer, the crack began to contract, the light flickering like a flame about to go out. Anakin reached out, as if to prolong the moment, but the portal suddenly closed, leaving him alone in the silence of the cave, enveloped in Obi-Wan's words and Luke's distant echo. Anakin walked through the corridors of the Jedi Temple with his mind on fire. The encounter with Luke and Obi-Wan through the crack in the Force had left deep marks, and each revelation echoed within him as a reminder of what was to come. He was still trying to understand if he had really talked to his son or if it had all been an illusion. But when he remembered the name Vader, the way Luke had described the terror of that black warrior, the weight of the truth seemed inevitable. There was no way to ignore it anymore. The memory of Luke and Obi-Wan in the future made it impossible to continue deceiving himself. As he left, he ran to Mace Windu and said in a grave tone, "Palpatine is the Sith Lord we seek." The reaction was immediate, and Windu gathered the masters to face the danger. Anakin, however, was instructed to remain in the council, awaiting news. He sat in the empty room, but his mind was far from calm. The weight of the choice seemed to be getting closer and closer. He remembered Padme, his visions of her death, and at the same time Luke's words, telling him that his mother had died in childbirth. It was as if the crack had been a warning from the Force itself. If he didn't act correctly, all of that would really come true. As he waited, the echo of the name Vader burned in his mind. He remembered Luke describing that warrior in black armor as the Emperor's right-hand man. Doubts consumed him, and when he felt the Force stir in a distant whirlwind, he knew the battle had begun. The minutes dragged on like hours. Anakin couldn't take it anymore and headed for the Chancellor's office. When he arrived, he found Windu facing Palpatine in a brutal duel. Force lightning lit up the room, the Jedi Master's lightsaber flashing against the Sith's fury. Anakin hesitated at the door, watching the conflict. His heart was racing, and he knew that this was the moment when his life and the galaxy would be defined. Windu managed to overpower Palpatine and pinned him against the window, ready to deliver the final blow. Palpatine screamed, appealing to Anakin, "If he kills me, she will die. Only I can save Padme." The young man approached, torn between loyalty to the Order and love. Windu warned him, "Stay out of this, Skywalker." But the image of Padme suffering in his nightmares was stronger. Anakin raised his saber, but instead of attacking the Jedi, he held back, waiting for every word from the Sith. Windu kept his lightsaber pointed at Palpatine, determined to end the Sith threat. In desperation, Anakin lunged forward and, with one swift stroke, cut off Windu's hand. The lightsaber fell into the void, and at that moment, Palpatine unleashed a torrent of lightning, throwing the Jedi Master through the window in a flash that lit up the hall. The ensuing silence made Anakin feel the weight of his choice crushing his chest. He fell to his knees before Palpatine, tears streaming down his face. "I need you. Only you can help me save Padme," he pleaded, his voice heavy with anguish. The Sith approached, his expression satisfied. "You did well, my young friend. Only with me will you find the power to defeat death. Kneel, and together we will rule destiny." Anakin bowed his head, overcome with pain. "Please, teach me. Don't let her die." Palpatine placed his hand on his shoulder and solemnly declared, "From now on, you will be called Darth Vader. The name reverberated through the room, but in that instant, time seemed to freeze for Anakin. The memory of the crack returned like a bolt of lightning. Luke's voice echoed in his mind, Darth Vader, the terror of the galaxy, the Emperor's hand. The blood froze in his veins. He saw before him the future in which he would become that monster, and despair turned to rage. Palpatine smiled, certain of his victory, but the young Skywalker raised his blue lightsaber and, in one devastating stroke, split the Emperor's body in two. A flash lit up the entire room. The lightning ceased, and the darkness that threatened the galaxy was shattered. The echo of Sidious's death reverberated in the Force, and Anakin stood, panting, feeling that he had broken the destiny that crushed him.